Mazzy here. I'm continuing the 60th anniversary of the Kinks, 1963 to 2023. And this is the third in this little series of videos, the Arista years, Arista records. Now, let me kind of hark back. If you haven't watched the other videos, I'll link them below. You should watch those, the various years of the Kinks. Now, because of my generation, I'm probably partial to the early Pi years and the reprise years of the 1960s till 70. But every decade, every section, every label, the Kinks has some interesting things. This is the Arista years, basically 1977 to, 84, 83, 84. We'll see when we get into it. But back in 1969, when the Kinks were allowed to finally, after 3-4 years of being banned in America touring, they were able to come back to America. Reprise rolled out this campaign, God Save the Kinks. And of course, there was Arthur and Lola. Lola was a huge hit. We keep going back to Lola. Lola's going to show up in this series as well. But the Arista years, depending on your pronunciation and your dialect. But did God save the Queen? But did God actually save the Kinks? I think not. I think it was Clive Davis that literally saved the Kinks. He brought him in his office. He said, okay, Kinks, Ray, Dave, Mick, and the others, you need to get rid of this theatrical shit you were doing at RCA Records. I'm paraphrasing now. I don't know what he actually said, but pretty much he said that stuff was too esoteric, too just slight, not what the audience wants. We're in the 1970s. You need to record some stadium rock records, and that's what happened. And the Kinks had like their next big comeback, huge. In fact, they sold more records than they ever sold in some of these, in some cases here. Now, I have a complicated relationship with the Arista years. The first two records, starting with this record. Now, I adore this record, Sleepwalker. I think this is the best cover of the Arista years, or the Arista years, Sleepwalker. Rod Dyer, Dyer Design in Los Angeles designed this cover. It's a fantastic cover. Like, look at this. Look at this cover. Just artistically, graphically, it's a wonderful cover. Life on the Road, Mr. Big Man, Sleepwalker, Brother, Jukebox Music, Sleepless Night, Stormy Sky, Full Moon, and Life Goes On, and Life Goes On and on and on and on. Fantastic record. The recording again, the production again of Ray Davis is just fabulous on this record. The songwriting with obviously Ray and then Dave. I love this record. This is 1977, their debut on Arista Records. Big fan of this record. And what's interesting about, I think, this entire series of Arista, in terms of you audiophiles and sound guys out there, I think most of these records were mastered by Bob Ludwig. Robert Ludwig did great mastering, and they sound fabulous. They're a thicker sound. They're more a rock and roll sound. Instead of the kind of twee theatrical stuff they were doing on RCA, they had some of Ray's great songwriting and Dave's great songwriting. In fact, there's some exceptions, or there's some key tracks here that Dave really kind of hits it out of the peripheral ballpark in a way. But these records are fantastic. These records are rock and roll anthems. There's great guitar riffs. There's the thick rock and roll sound. Now remember, this was just, hovering around that time of punk and new wave, and then disco was happening. And as much as I hate when, quote, the early bands were jumping on the disco or punk bandwagon, Ray and Dave were able to do it and do it well, and it suited their style. Remember, because when they came out in obviously they started in 73, I mean 63, but in 1964 with All Day and All the Night and You Really Got Me, they were the hardest, loudest bands of all the British invasion bands, not the Beatles, not Dave Clark Five, not the Animals. They were the hard rock band. Those riffs were great. And despite what the rumors say, Jimmy Page did not do the riffs on You Really Got Me. But remember, this was an interesting time in music in 1970s. The big stadium bands were happening. A couple years, the next year later, with Van Halen would come along and cover You Really Got Me. Jay Page did not play guitar on You Really Got Me. It was Dave Davis on that. Now, this is my favorite album of the Arista years. And they still had this, there's a lot of great acoustic guitar sounds on this record. And to me, side one of this record is perfect. The entire record is great. It's fabulous. It starts with Misfits, an amazing song, goes into Hay Fever, Black Messiah, maybe not politically correct today, but a great song, and Rock and Roll Fantasy. As I said in one of the previous videos, Ray Davis really wrote about the whole rock and roll thing, rock and roll stars. He did that in the theatrical years, and he records a song, and they write a song, Rock and Roll Fantasy, on this. And it's one of those songs, every time I hear it, it just gives me goosebumps. It's beautifully recorded. It's an epic piece of American pop music, of UK pop music, of the Kinks pop music, the great writing of Ray Davis in 1977. Anyway, it goes on to side two. This happens to be my UK original copy of this record. I like this cover too. I think it really suits the material. And this is Misfits, and this is from 1978. Then we get into a time period in 1978 with the Kinks' Low Budget. This is, to me, where, as much as I would get these albums, in fact, this is a promo that someone from Arista gave me, and I didn't really grab onto this album in the day. I think this started a series of some of the worst cover art, the Kinks. It doesn't suit the band. It seems like literally low budget. Actually, it does fit the theme, low budget. It looks like a low friggin' budget record. This is a terrible art direction for this fabulous band. And it had a song that became somewhat of a hit. Almost, this is where the Kinks, like many other bands of their day, were almost grasping onto whatever the trend was. And they got into the disco thing with I Wish I Could Fly Like Superman. It's a fabulous song, and they really do it well. And it became like a minor hit, not a major hit. But this album actually did really well in America. Catch Me Now I'm Fallen is a fantastic song. I'm reading right literally over the hype sticker. And this is where Ray really changed his writing and what he was writing about. He was writing about contemporary issues, oil shortages, gas shortages, turmoil in the United Kingdom. But again, problematic, but this album actually did well. The Kinks had another resurgence. Huge stadium band. They were selling out stadiums in America, and mostly in America, actually, more than the United Kingdom and the rest of the world. But they were doing really well. A lot of great thick guitar chords throughout all these records I'm going to show you. But I can't, I don't like revisionist history and revisionist reissues. But if it were me, if I were Dave, if I were Ray, I would take all these later Arista records and change the cover art and really give it a twist. Now, purists don't like that, but I think this is a terrible record. It doesn't really fit the music. Fits the concept of the title, but that's it. And of course, as I said, Van Halen and other groups were covering Kinks songs. I mean, Kinks were, some people think they were kind of the inventor or so influenced to punk music, to Britpop music. The Kinks were the ones that artists in the late 70s into the 80s, into the punk, post-punk, into Britpop, into the late 80s, into the 90s. They weren't afraid to cite the Kinks as an influence. Unlike the Beatles or Stones or anyone else, the Kinks were always cool to musicians and to other bands. Now, this is a fun record. I don't know if it's a fantastic record. This is really this is from 1980. This is the obligatory double live album, and it's great. And of course, something I said in an earlier video on the Kinks is Ray would always tease the audience with Lola and the riffs of "You Really Got Me" and "Day of the Night," and do those riffs and go into something else. But great live record. You got to do the live record in the 70s, especially into the 1980s. But remember, this is a part where I was kind of, even though I'd pick these records up, I didn't do deep dive into these records. I was divorced of these records, getting into punk, post-punk, and that. And as much as I love the Kinks, and I'd get promos of these, I really didn't dive in until years later when I found the gems on these records. Another promo I got, Give the People What They Want. Another kind of mediocre album artwork. Look at that. I mean, that's kind of cheap-ass artwork. You got Give the People What You Want. Again, literally it's that. Give the people what they want musically. Destroyer is a great song, but again, it does the riff of "You Really Got Me," and he sings about Lola. It's kind of one of those, almost like what's the John Lennon song on the White Album? You told me about strawberry fields. Revisiting early songs and the lyrics of later songs, and Ray does it here. It's a great song. A lot of thick guitar stuff again in that time when Van Halen and just rock and roll. I'm not talking punk rock here, although there's some bits like that. But at least Ray occasionally gets into his really great ballads on here, and there are a few of those in here. I like Yo-Yo. It's a great song, and Better Things ends it, which is a kind of a lovely song. But anyway, some great rock and roll. These albums all have incredible tracks if you pick and choose out of them. But all in all, as an album, I think they lack, but it's what the people wanted. It actually, literally, I mean, I don't know if he's doing a riff on the audience or anything. Give the people what you want. Really? Clive Davis says the people want rock and roll stadium rock, and that's what they were doing here. Now, this is something I'm so happy I got, and this is I don't know if, and there must have been an American 12-inch of this, but this is my original UK Arista 12-inch, and this is "Come Dancing." This was all over MTV. I love this song. And this is where we get into that kind of hard rock vaudevillian side of Ray Davis on this and the Kinks, and I just love this song. And what's great about this 12-inch, it's got excuse me, I'm choked up here with Ray, and "Come Dancing." It's got the long extended remix, and then side 2 noise and extended remix, which is really fabulous. But this, apparently, I think there might be recently a CD set with this on it. But up until the last few years, this is the only place you could get the entire long extended mix of "Come Dancing" on here. And this is my UK copy, and this is wonderful. This is, how long is this minute? 4 minutes, 27 seconds, 45 RPM. So good, so cool. It's just a fun song. Again, Ray's always been to that retro side, as I said earlier, in the theatrical of 50s, 60s rock and roll, sock hops and dancing and all the clubs and the party venues back in, obviously, the UK. We had it in America with teen clubs, things like that, that I remember our band playing at. Love this. This is fantastic. Pick this up if you can. And that leads into this, "State of Confusion." Another terrible album art cover by the Kinks. What the F? But again, as I said, sonically, these sound really good. Mastered, I think all of these by Robert Ludwig. He did most of these. And this has "Come Dancing," but of course it is the album edit, different version of that. "State of Confusion," definitely Maybe. "Don't Forget to Dance." "Don't Forget to Dance" is a beautiful, it's one of Ray's best songs too. So again, every album they had several songs that are pretty great, mixed in with that thick guitar, rock and roll, anthemic type of songwriting and record making, the rock and roll thing. So I think it turned me off a little bit, some of this stuff at the time. Now again, revisiting that, I enjoy it more now, but I was into something else, sort of minimalism, of punk, of the sound of post-punk. But this is more that, like bands like, if you like Van Halen, you like those kind of bands, you'll like this. And I was never a big fan of Van Halen. I appreciate them, Eddie Van Halen, All the Power. That was not my thing. But this, again, another promo copy. I continue to get the promo copies, and I literally would listen to them once or something and file them away. But I would listen to the hits, and Come Dancing was a great hit on here. Labor of Love, Young Conservatives, he's writing something really different here, but the Kinks. And then lastly, and that was the last album, I believe, I think that last album that Mick Avery plays every track on, as I recall, their drummer. I think so. Anyway, and then Word of Mouth, another terrible, this is definitely of the 80s art direction style, and I dislike this. I don't think it holds up. There's a period in the 80s of this kind of design work that doesn't hold up for me, for my personal taste. And again, as I said, let's take these 4 albums or so and just change the friggin' covers on them and call it a day. Now, Master by Bob Ludwig Master Disc. Again, this album sounds fabulous. Massive reduction again. But the real key on this, aside from again, Ray Davis continues to produce these records, but the magical song on this is not a Ray Davis song. It's a Dave Davis song. And it's a song that I didn't latch onto right away when I heard this. It didn't hit me until years later, maybe even decades later, when I heard a comp. And it's a song that's been picked up and used on soundtracks over the years. And it's a wonderful Dave Davis song that is on side 1, track 4, Living on a Thin Line. Go listen to that song now. There's something magical about that song. There's something wonderful about that song. Living on a Thin Line is the hit, in my mind, off this record. Word of Mouth, this came out in 1984. This is the end of their tenure with Arista, but it's actually a really good record. Again, with a terrible shit-ass cover, but a fantastic record. Other songs on here are great. Missing Persons is great. Word of Mouth is good. So you got your mix of thick rock and roll. Again, it's really kind of Ray and Dave and the extras, the other musicians on here. Mick Avery might be on one track, but I can't recall exactly. But that's it for the Arista years. And I would say, if you have none and you come across this, I showed this in my comp video. This came out after the fact, after they were leaving Arista. The album du jour is to do a greatest hits once an artist leaves a label. And this came out, I originally got this on compact disc. That was the CD era, I believe. This is 1986, so it's right in that crossover period. I got the CD this, and I eventually picked up a vinyl copy. Come Dancing with the Kinks. Fabulous record. Every track on this opens up with You Really Got Me Live. You got Destroyer, Jukebox Music, Rock and Roll Fantasy again from those first few albums. Come Dancing, Sleepwalker, Do It Again, which I probably didn't mention. I should have. It's one of their better records around this period, one of their better songs. Alive Lola, you got Low Budget, Heart of Gold, not the Neil Young song, but you got Misfits, Living on a Thin Line is on this record, that great Dave Davis song. And of course, you got a live version of Celluloid Heroes from the RCA years, from Everyone in Showbiz, different version of it, this later live version. But you got one of their great, great singles, a great rocker and a great Christmas song, Father Christmas. I have the single of that, the original UK single, but that's on here as well. So this is a fabulous comp that gives you the entire kind of history and overview of you know, Clive Davis saving the Kinks in the 70s into the early 80s. Literally, you know, Clive Davis saving the Kinks. God didn't save the Kinks. Clive Davis saved the Kinks. Anyway, 60 years of the Kinks. This period from the 80s, and now it's 40 years. Actually, 45 years, if we're counting the 70s. Love this stuff. Love the Kinks. I can't go overboard with showing Kinks records, but thanks for watching. Mazzy loves you, and God save the Kings.